Today, we take a closer look at intergenerational differences, a comparison between how fathers were raised and how they choose to raise their own children.
Parenting. Let's talk about this.
Being a parent is about godliness.
I
find so much of myself through parenting. There is no formula of raising a child.
Hello, this is Pansy on the left.
I think having a good support structure makes it all worth it.
Today, I am sitting with Ntate Makobane and Vusi Nqande to discuss intergenerational parenting. Dumelang bontate.
Dumelang.
Ntate Makobane, re qale ka wena. How much of your own childhood and the parenting styles that you received influence how you decided to raise your own children?
I would say my upbringing wasn't that easy, and I didn't want this to go to my children. I always wanted to bring my children in a different way. And as for the wisdom, they should not go through the experience that I went through, because I believe my parents did not have maybe the knowledge with time as that that I have. My experience where born was different. So I didn't want my children to to have the same experience that I had.
Did you have two parents present while you were growing
No.
up? Okay.
As a matter of fact, I didn't even know my father. He was there, but he was not with my mom. And my mom used to work. I grew up, or I was brought up with my relatives.
Okay.
But the foundation was okay, because that hardship that I went through made me the better person that I am
But
today.
did you have the father figure, more the relatives in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, how would you say a similar just question about your own upbringing in comparison to how you're raising your children?
You know what? I think there's a particular aspect of our families as Black people that we struggle to acknowledge, and Ntate Makobane actually touched on it. And it's what we call today blended families, right? I come from a blended family, and I think the majority of Black people actually come from blended families. If the father isn't there, and he's somewhere else, or he has a different family, and you grow up with relatives, you grow up, it becomes like a blended family. So I grew up wanting, or rather telling myself that I wouldn't have a blended family, that I would stick to, a family unit. But the truth of the matter is that life happens. Two people won't necessarily stay together for whatever reason.
So we have a generation of men that were raised by women because of dads that were absent. How do you think then that affects them as they grow up? Because then you get a generation of older men that are calling current fathers, soft. You can't discipline your child. You refuse to smack your child because you weren't smacked because you grew up. Do you think there's a direct correlation in terms of, the softer dad in comparison to the older, stricter father?
I think this is an individual, maybe personal experience of how you want to raise your child or your children. Yes, there's this thing of maybe from the old, I would say the old school or the old fathers would say, maybe the understanding that boys don't cry or you need to be tough. I believe it is right to cry if you're a man, because that's a way of expressing your emotions. Because in the long run, that thing, it creates a damage to a person, because you keep this pain in you, that in the long run, it's going to create a very negative impact. And also it creates that, it builds up that anger. And that you're going to end up doing things that you should not be doing.
That strongly references to the, societal stereotypes about what masculinity is supposed to look like. So, Vusi, what are some of the stereotypes about being a man and being a boy that you were fed growing up that you do not want your son to experience?
That you don't have emotions. We are taught that as a man you don't have emotions. Besides, you don't cry. You just don't feel anything. That was the main thing. And I think part of the reason in sort of being fed that was then it creates a disengagement between the child and the parent, because the more involved you are with your child, the more you understand the emotional state. But at the same time, what I understand about the previous generation of fathers was that they were raising based on a survival mode, right? They were trying to keep children alive, because of all that was happening throughout, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, all of that was happening. Parents were trying to keep children alive. And when that is your primary focus, your primary objective, there actually there is no need.
Your mandate is
there's no
specific,
need to listen to your child's problems. All you need to know is that, are you alive?
Yes.
Are you fed?
You're going to school.
You're going to school. That's that, because then the minute you have to deal with things beyond that, what it does is that it causes you to have to reflect a lot. When I deal with my son, who is 11 years old, whenever we have sort of engaged on a certain thing, I have to reflect on myself as well. Like, okay, he's crying over something. For me to say, don't cry, I sort of negate the fact that he has emotions.
Yeah.
But then we don't have those kind of relationships. We're more engaged.
But where do you think that process takes place in terms of when as a man having to unlearn? Do you think it's a conscious decision you take before you become a father, or is it something you learn just along the way while raising this boy? Actually, he's a whole human being that has emotion, and I have to acknowledge that as a guy that was taught monna halle.
I think the most important thing is that you need to have people who set a different example. Because if you're operating throughout your life with no other understanding of parenting, like you can actually be a father in this way, it's easier for you to fall into the toxic patterns that everyone is perpetuating. So once you come across people who I had a friend of mine, a best friend of mine, whose father became early on in me becoming a father, he was like my role model, because he was such a totally different man to the men that I was used to, because I was used to my father was a policeman, so he was very strict and was very tough, and then you come across a father who laughs with his children, who sits with them and has conversations, a father who calls meetings and say, okay, now we need to talk. And for me, then that starts creating, that change. And from that point, then it is a conscious decision. With every moment, you have to think like, my nature that I was taught is telling me at this point that I need to do this. But now, from what I have learned from myself, I actually have to take a moment first. Even in terms of when they say, do you hit your child or you don't hit your child? Because of how you were brought up, so once you get into the moment where you feel like, hey, levanta lekai, you sort of catch yourself and say, first and foremost, are you angry? Are you going to do this because you're angry?
Where's this coming
or
from?
how about you just take a minute and just breathe, think about it, sleep on it, and see if they,
change.
Yeah.
Dr. Makoban, what was your point of reference in terms of the kind of father you were for your children? Was it the older fathers and the older uncles, or did you just wing it?
If it's anything that I wish every human being can encounter, is to allow yourself to be, go with the flow. Be easy. Don't be tough on yourself. Go with time, accept, or you don't live in the past. Look at your weaknesses and your stronghold. How can I do things better? How can I be the father that when I come home, my kids should be looking forward to see the father.
Yes.
Not to become home like
People start running
Yeah.
away.
I'm telling you, the minute you open the door, they start running under the table.
Yeah. But again, I was having a conversation with someone regarding that, just how Lorona, sometimes as women, we perpetuate a model, yeah, dad, he's the strict one, otlo shapang. Like if a child is doing something wrong, hey, it's your dad. Like
Yeah.
your dad is just the guy that just enforces things, and whenever, so you end up just being scared of Papa. Hey.
I had a conversation some years ago. I had a conversation with my sister about my nephew. My nephew is 8 now, where every time I would go home to visit, they would have a long list of things that he had done, like went to so. And I one day I told him, like, please don't do that to me. I don't want my nephew to be scared of me.
Yes.
I don't want him every time he sees me coming, then because he would do that. you know.
Yeah.
When I come in that door, he goes out that door. Because now he knows that there's going to be, punishment that
Yes.
needs to happen. And I'm like,
disciplinary anyway.
but at the same time, what it forced me to do was that I realized that the actual best way to discipline a child without the need for violence or aggression, whatever, is actually to build a solid relationship with them, whereby they're more scared of disappointing you than they are scared of making you angry. Yes, our fathers were disciplinarians. They made sure things happened, and they were there in the house. They provided this, but we didn't have a relationship with them. And at the same time, manhood is like a wall. It happens on the other side of the wall. You know that it's there. There's a thing called manhood. You see it. You see a man walking down. You see your father walking into the house.
Yeah.
But everything happens behind this wall. So when you then become a man, you actually are not aware of how the mechanics of it works.
Yeah.
How do I get respect instead of being feared? Because all you know is strictness. And from my understanding, how you get, the respect is just building a genuine relationship.
Yeah. But do you find that you're part of a generation of men that are able to sit down and talk about fatherhood just openly, just over and above just showing pictures that, yeah, my daughter's growing up, but do you get into the intricacies of, this is the challenge that I'm facing, how did you do it? Because I feel like as moms, we do that. I think that's probably all we talk about once we have a child. But you guys go through the same experience of sharing with each other as men about the challenges you face.
I don't know about Ntate Mokubane, but when my daughter was born, me and my two friends of my closest friends were also expecting kids, right? So what we did, we actually started a group for a WhatsApp group just for fathers amongst the circle of friends, whereby then we started sharing, personal experiences and say, right from, because and say, okay, how do you prepare a hospital bag? What should be in it? She's not okay. What am I supposed to do? Because hey, I don't know if I can talk to her. Is it hormones?
Dr. Mokobane, how do you think parenting roles have changed? Do you think they were more defined during your time, or are they now? Because now we see a generation of men that are more involved, men that are changing diapers, and men that are involved in feeding. Do you think when you were raising your kids, you were just the dad, just there for the financial support and just for discipline, or even during your time were you a bit more involved in the household, like your generation of dads, the old school dad?
Well, maybe I could be considered as the old, but I think
with some elements of the new.
I always been keeping up with times.
Yes.
I used to change nappies for my kids, engage with them from time to time. Actually, and I don't even have boys, I've got girls. They would come to me when they need to be changed.
Yeah.
So I always been there for them, because I really wanted to change this old thing of fathers being considered like ho-ho.
Yes.
I always wanted to build this bond, this strong between my kids and myself. And I always have a problem with my daughters being seen in the street with the boys, or not knowing where your daughter is at a certain time of, hey, it's 7 o'clock, where's my daughter? So I would say to them, hey, if you have a boyfriend, please bring them in. We want to know who you are involved with.
Yeah, you're like a Google father.
As I'm saying, go, go with times.
Yeah.
So, and this, it will even, you'll see it was so difficult for the boyfriends to come and say, what kind of parents are you? You have,
Especially you.
especially me. And no, seriously, they will ask, hey, and they'll come in and I'll welcome them and make them feel at
And
home.
you don't lock the door.
I don't lock the door. I said, if it's anything I don't want you to be in the street because the world is sick. What about if people come and attack you in the street and stuff like that? Well, there is hope. But I want them to feel free to understand that it's better to know where, if as parents, we should know where they are, with whom they are in the house,
Yeah.
And even if when things don't work out properly, I would sit down with their boyfriend and show them life differently.
Yeah. I think just in conclusion, I think the parenting landscape has changed a lot. Even the fatherhood landscape has also changed a lot. So it's amazing how our own childhoods and the parenting styles that we got influenced how we're raising our own children, and not necessarily because we want to continue what our parents were doing, but because we're using it as kind of an example of what kind of father or mother not to be. It sounds harsh, but in essence, it's a reality of the life that we're facing. So we would really like to hear your thoughts. So please drop us a comment down below and share your thoughts and experiences with us. And please don't forget to subscribe, AskAParent_ZA, and see you next time.